Okay, so I propose that we give it a go. Warm welcome. We are very happy to meet all of us today, and there will be more people joining into the meeting as we progress. Learning networks for first movers is a facilitated process for peer-to-peer support, providing a toolbook and on-the-job training for change makers. Our agenda today includes, first of all, a brief presentation of learning networks for first movers by the creators of this service. A panel discussion with the experienced development practitioners that once again we salute and I salute and welcome today. And final remarks about how learning networks for first movers work in practice and how to become part of the first groups that we shall be setting up in the upcoming weeks. In terms of the interactions during the event, I would like to say that participants are invited to write questions, remarks, and any comment in the chat. The panelists are invited to raise hands. And of course, interventions will be welcome throughout the entire event. So the entire event will be based on an interaction mode. The meeting is recorded, as you already noticed, and as well, the event is broadcasted on LinkedIn Live of Lumin Spino page, as you probably already noticed. So the thing is that we wanted to provide the opportunity for people that could not directly enter into the meeting to watch it on LinkedIn Live. Okay, so it's been quite a while since myself and Charles Demonchy, my partner in crime, have been working in learning networks for first movers, aiming to provide it as a complete package. So we mixed our experiences and our knowledge, Charles, in terms of facilitation. So Charles has been a long experienced facilitator on the international arena. And myself working as a development practitioner and essentially as a first mover for over 20 years. I would like to first invite Charles to open the presentation of what we actually managed to do and to share with you a little bit of what we believe to be the use of this process and of these tools. So Charles, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raluca. I was wondering whether I should go into the content of the toolbook, and I decided, well, maybe I would like to go a little bit back into history to see where it comes from. And I think our cooperation goes back about 17 years ago, when I was working for a European assistance program, and we were invited to come to Timisoara to do a session for a very open-minded and daring first mover called Raluca, Simo Buzak, and many of, well, you all know her. And since then we have been continuing cooperation, and we did many things. And I remember from all those things we did, one day, maybe 7 years ago, she called me. She said, "Yeah, I want to do regional strategies for health, education, agriculture, and business support." Okay, I said, "How long do we have?" Well, the people I want to join together with is they are a bit hard to get, so maybe one day, if it doesn't exceed until 3 o'clock. So if we get lunch, then I said, okay. I thought it was a crazy idea to do 4 strategies in 4 days. But Raluca, well, she thought this was quite a normal thing to do, and this is one of the things I learned from her, that until you do it, it's impossible. But she just made it happen, and the people were there, and they were quite open, and it all went well. It went in a kind of natural way, and then how we did it. Well, this is part of what we later wrote up in the toolbook. But well, it was so remarkable that I still remember it, and how we did it is actually written down. Then sometime later, well, that was during the COVID uh, time. Veruca already started her own company, and she started facilitating her own sessions also. And then she called me one day and said, "Well, we're going to do a session here in Timisoara. So let's write up the things we did on the strategy session." I said, "Okay, let's do that." So that's how we started to write it up in a practical way, so you can really do it. And she, of course, she did it also. And that's how we came to the next stream, which is one of the learning networks, which we already were talking 12 years ago. We said, it would be nice if we could make up a learning network on a European scale, which only became possible after, well, when Lumen Spina was founded and Gianluca was there in charge. So then we said, okay, maybe we can do it now, not knowing how much preparation it takes before you are ready to do it. So that's about. But I think, well, maybe today we will see how far we are, and I think, Luca, you can take us a little bit more into what it is all about that we are talking about.
Okay. So just one thing that I need to mention as well, that after I will give my share of the thoughts, our panel discussion will go in two parts. So we have 8 panelists, so there will be 4 panelists in the first part, moderated by Chas, and in the second part, 4 panelists moderated by myself. And the topic of our panel is how do you start collaboration where there was none before. Okay, so I resonate completely with what Charles said, and indeed we have been working together for a long while, more than 15 years now, and I saw Charles facilitating processes and meetings and making things happen in Timisoara and in other locations in Europe. As far as myself I'm concerned, there are 2 questions that I would put at the core of why I decided to put an effort and time into co-designing the learning networks for first movers. These 2 questions are not academic questions, and they are not theoretical questions, but they are questions with which I hope that most of the people that want to change something and to actually stir a process of development, they resonate with. So my first question is where were my colleagues, where were my peers when I needed them? You know, as a first mover, and I mentioned to you that I got the chance to be a first mover for many endeavors that took place in the economic development of Romania, and not only. And I remember that when I was reaching out for peer support, I understood that it was always there, but I needed to work for it, to make an effort to consume resources, to find the right people in the right contexts to advise with. So what I'm saying, that peer support, it's not something that you can access just intuitively, or something that is already there for you to find. So at the same time, as a first mover, when you are in a territory or in a community and you want to develop something and you want to bring stakeholders on board, motivate people, engage people, follow on an action plan, okay? Make it very realistic. You are every day at the center of many tensions, let's say. You have to be paying attention to many details. And this is a type of peer support that I found to be absolutely crucial in the role of change maker if you want to do something right. Of course, that methods and recipes are useful. We get access to many theoretical support, but we don't have access to peer support just like this. We need to strive for it, look for it. Maybe we find it, maybe we don't. This is why, so this is the first answer to why. With Luminspino, with my company, what I'm putting on the table and we are putting on the table are process consulting solutions. So actually, we want to translate all these invisible processes and communicate them, share them, structure them. And the second why, the second question that for me is very practical and at the same time very important is, how do we make things happen? How on earth do we change the current situation? And we are seeking also with these learning networks to provide additional recognition to this role of first mover. I know that all of us here, we are in a way or another a first mover in our domain, in our organization, in our territories. But all the skills and all the experience, they don't just, they cannot be learned from a single source. It's a matter of putting layer after layer of experience. Learning networks for first movers is an horizontal process, and we can accommodate it with any vertical subject. So take it smart specialization, take smart city, climate action. But no matter the sector or the vertical, learning networks for first movers, it's an horizontal thing, and it tells about how design and implementation of strategies can take place, how we can make things happen. So just to conclude, I would say that first movers, agents of change, they need a lot of support nowadays, especially nowadays that all the resources are critical, and that we need to go beyond the way that we did development until now, and do it in a hopefully far less destructive than until now, into, you know, a new type of change making. So these are my initial considerations, and it is my joy and pleasure now to thank, first of all, the 8 panelists that agreed to take their time, dedicate their time to be with us today. I must say that each of them, for me, represent a strong inspiration, and I'm very convinced that the feedback that they will provide today, and the question that the answer that they will provide to how do you start collaboration where there was none or little before, will be very interesting. And we would like to kick now the panel discussion, the first round of panel discussions. And for this aim, I give the floor to Charles, who will moderate the first panel round of panel discussions and introduce as well each invited speaker in their turn. Thank you, Charles.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I will briefly introduce the panelists. I will start with Roberto Dallario. And Roberta is a long-serving member of the board and currently director of RADA, and she has a long experience in regional development, starting in Emilia-Romagna, and you're now active in many projects, and I couldn't find an agency where you're not in one of the working groups from DG region to OECD lead program, but it's your thematic is local development and SMEs, and it's very much linked to the roots of development. That's at least my impression of the red thread in your career. And of course, you have wide experience in everything from smart specialization to territorial cooperation and policies, and well, all the complex management issues which go along with it. So, well, very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Next, we also have Christian Soblas, and I've become to know Christian as well. He defines himself as a EU lobbyist for ideas, and for those who do not know, among his main achievements are the creation of EURADA and the EU Business Network, Angels Network, IBAN. He was the first to make a paper on benchmarking in the public sector, and write a strategy guide for SMEs and other things. It's too much. But today he is a promoter of fresh ideas. So very welcome. And I follow him on LinkedIn because he has sometimes hilarious posts also over there. Thank you, Christian, for joining us. And we have from Finland, we have Jerker Jonsson. Jerker, are you there? I don't see yet his.
Yes, I'm.
Ah, you're there. Okay, great,
Yes.
great. Can you put your video on?
Yes.
Okay. Then we see your face.
Yeah, actually, Jerker is 2 times in the meeting. In one,
I had a problem, so
yeah. So in one, he has also video on and video off. He appears 2 times, so he's.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so you are well. Okay, well, Jerker is a Finnish economist in specialized in international trade and development and political science. And he works in the international department of the Regional Council of Ostrobotnia, which has brought him to Latin America. And you've been doing a large international career in Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. For today, relevant is that he was the first mover of the Ostrobotnian model for smart specialization, which we studied a little bit, and I think it's a very novel interactive method where they combine surveys on performance gaps with focus groups analysis to develop very intelligent smart strategy specialization strategies. S3 strategies was difficult word. Thank you, Jerker, for being here.
Thank you.
And from the Netherlands, we have Luc Hulsman, who is dedicated to the case of the Northern Netherlands for 15 years since he joined the Northern Netherlands Alliance after his economic study in the University of Groningen. And he is responsible for the smart specialization strategy of the northern part, and is also involved in the ERDF program of the Northern Netherlands. And I think some of you will know Luc as an enthusiastic and well appreciated participant of many working groups from URADA and also from other EU programs. So thank you very much for joining us today, Luc. Now, of course, the burning question is what we selected one burning question. We said how do you see collaboration where there was none before or little, and how do you start? What is important? So we would like you to invite you to reflect a bit on that, and if you have some comments on the toolbook, where we also did this, that would be very welcome. I would like to start with Roberta, and afterwards, well, we will just join the conversation. Please, Roberta, can you take it from?
So thank you, Charles, and thank you to Reluca too for this invitation and for the opportunity to follow the process of elaboration of this tool that you are working on. So the question is a complicated question. That is how to start a collaboration when no collaboration was there. And as I believe many of us, we faced this problem in our different activities. And of course, the first question is, why do we have to collaborate? I think that and it's not so simple to answer, in the sense that if you have to start a collaboration, you have to have clear or almost clear what you want to get. So in my opinion, the first question is which challenges you want to face thanks to the collaboration. Then, of course, on the basis of these challenges, you should think about who could contribute to the fulfilling of the objectives. And sometimes, as you have already said, and I also, as Reluca underlined in his speech, because she faced often dealing with, I guess, the elaboration of strategies for operational programs, or even in a single project funded by the European Union or funded directly by a public authority, you always have to think who can contribute to the objectives, and to find the right person in the right organization. Surely, it is important for me to take into account all elements which have to be the component for the final result, and this means not to have a silos approach. So first, to be very open and to integrate and to be inclusive in the involving organization or representative of different organization. Second, of course, and this is another big problem, to find the right person in the organization. Often, when we work at regional or territorial development level, we are forced to involve those representatives who are indicated by the different associations, not necessarily being effectively representative of their stakeholders. And this is another big problem, obviously, which cannot be solved by the methodology that you are proposing. But of course, during the application of the methodology and applying this methodology, maybe at the first meeting, you immediately understand if that person is really able to take on the table, to put on the table the real problems that their stakeholders are facing. This is the first question in my opinion. But if you want me to go ahead, or if you want me to stop, I don't know. Tell me.
What you had two questions. So it's the who. That's the first one.
So of course, it depends on the different topics, but I'm a real a fan of the integration. So I really believe that people and organization coming from different fields can contribute to create, let's say, a common understanding on how to solve and to face a peculiar challenge at territorial level. This means that often someone is not, let's say, often we do not take into consideration some fields which are very important in reaching the objective that you want to reach. So, for example, dealing with the major challenges that we have had, digitalization, just transition, there are so many fields of action, so many topics that have to be taken into consideration. So, in my opinion, the integration is the most important aspect for the success of in the elaboration of a strategy. Integration of different skills and competences. This is apparently, let's say, when I read, let me tell you that when I read your the documents that you sent me, I thought that in theory, not in theory, that this approach is made of common sense. But often we see that this common sense is not applied, maybe for the problems that Reluca was telling us just a few minutes ago, in the sense that you have always to take into consideration the different equilibrium that you have in the different organizations that should be involved in this process, in this kind of process. And often it's better not to invite somebody than to have somebody in your working group that maybe is not accepted by the other organization. So you always have to be very diplomatic. And another element, which is the one that you have already talked about, which is the timing. People working in public administration have not a lot of time, and sometimes they apply this common sense without, because they learned by doing, like Reluca was telling us. They learn by doing when they have to organize this working group. But making this work of facilitating the working group is not easy at all, and it's something that has to be learned. So another thing that I really appreciate, and I really believe that is something on which public civil servants, but in general, people working in complex organization should really focus, in the sense that our daily work is try to get to common goals, but through compromises and hearing opinion of people. And this is something very difficult when you have time pressure, and when you have to give a result, when you have to deliver a document with clear indicators, with a logic, with impact indicators, then sometimes in order to create a perfect document, you lose the sense of reality and the sense of let's say, of practical questions. So doing this kind of job is really difficult, and I really believe that a process in which somehow you can recognize these skills and you can make these skills more evident should be very important.
Yeah.
Then I leave the floor to Christian, who surely will have many other interesting things to say on that.
So integration is the main job, or is the most difficult one, and sometimes you run into stressful situations. Christian.
Yes, you will expect from me that I don't start in a logical way, because the woo is too easy.
You're free to do what you want.
For me, the woo is too easy. I follow many years ago already some S3, and some regions were happy to say that they had organized 130 meetings with people, getting all the stakeholders together, and then you read their strategy, and only some of the obvious thinking were in the strategy and not so much real local assets or whatever. So I would really invite people to think in reverse thinking. If you want to bring people, the first reason is, why do you need the collaboration and what do you want to achieve together? And then you choose the people who will move in the direction that you want to go. Let's take a second strategy for innovation. If you want a strategy for innovation, I think you should invite people who represent startups, deep tech, local, incremental startup, or whatever. You need to find a few experts who are specialists in the different type of innovation. A guy who knows about deep tech don't care about social innovation, and probably vice versa. You need to find also people from the funding community. Again, if you have an ambition to be a deep tech, innovative valley, according to the new innovation strategy of the EU, and you have no venture capital, your university didn't make a technology transfer for the last 20 years, I think you have a problem. But maybe if you believe in social innovation, you should look carefully about crowdfunding, and this is enough. Mm-hmm. And you can continue like that with market specialists and so on and so on. What I think today, there is a lot of academic paper about vertical multi-governance concept. The EU, the member states, the region, the civil society, university, or whatever, but we forget about horizontal multi-governance. The best example for the moment for me in Belgium, we have a mayor who is an ecologist, but he refused to give the planning for wind energy in his municipality. So the wrong people at the wrong place with the wrong advice. And the second question that we would like to reflect together is, why are we here together to try to find a new way of collaboration or whatever? First, I start my career 40 years more in economic development, and the topics are still the same. What have we learned? What has been used with all those technical assistance, 3 or 4% of the cohesion budget? What have we learned about interact capacity building and so on and so on? There are many reasons why our strategy have difficulties or sometimes fail. The first is that we have difficulties to hierarchy the priorities. The second is probably to align the budget and the human resources with the result that we expect. The third, we are more or less good to copy and paste new tools who were invented somewhere else in the world, but sometimes we have not in the region the essential component about it. I made recently a survey on the website in France. I found that there were 50 or 60 organizations who has labeled themselves accelerator. Okay, like the E Combinator from Silicon Valley, where a commissioner was making some trips a few weeks ago. The only thing is that out of this list, less than 10% take a stake in the company they provide advice to. And all the others are just helping to find the investor. What's the difference with an incubator that was created 50 years ago? Just renaming something and not working. So that's why your initiative to have first mover who can really bring enthusiasts and really look to what is interesting to do. So my last ideas that I came through was to build what we should call a knowledge processing factory, and to have your group of first mover being taking the pivotal role to translate in a logic intervention approach global knowledge into practical, realistic realities for the local people. For the SME, that is meaning to give them the possibility to have new market, to make profit, of course, and certainly this is the main issue. The second, to build capacity for everybody in the administration and in intermediary organization. And finally, and I will use maybe a scandal word, to build unfair competitive advantage for your region. When I say unfair, that's an advantage that your neighbor cannot copy as easily as it's done with my accelerator example a few minutes ago. So let's take the two big issues of today at EU level, digitalization and green agenda. What does it really mean for your region?
Before you do, sorry, Christian, I would like to see if we can have some reactions on your, let's say, because you propose a certain route towards development and towards starting the cooperation, which is, if I can resume shortly, it's, you say you have to first look at the opportunities and then look at the people you need to make them real, which is a bit different from what Roberta said, that you look at the goals and then co-create. So I would like to, before we go into the details, I would like to have, because these are two routes, which are sometimes, well, you can do both of them, but they are very, very different. I see the hand of Roberta.
Yes, I don't believe that these are two different routes. These are routes which can be integrated in the sense that Christian stressed, if I well understood, the fact that you have to play on your playground, on what you have, but take into consideration what you need in order to reach the goal. So in a certain sense, he was stressing the aspect of integration, but also in a multi-level or horizontal way, in the sense not only vertical. This is what I've understood from Christian.
Okay, so we will not put them as opposites, but we will put them, or differences, but we will put them one in line with the other.
No, I think you usually start with what Roberta has said, but we need to go one step further if we want to avoid all the traps, to have a nice strategy on paper and not so good or spectacular result. And this is where the articulation of your proposal to have this first mover is absolutely needed and critical in region to achieve success.
Yes, Roberta? Ah, yeah.
No,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Jerker or Luc, would you like to comment on the discussion up to now?
I would say that they're the opposites. I mean, if you have a goal or you have a challenge, then I mean, if the goal is to solve the challenge, so it's the same thing, I would say.
Yeah. The goal is to serve the challenge.
That to solve the challenge.
Yeah.
That should you have a goal-oriented things or should you have challenge-oriented things? Well, there are the two sides of the coin, because you want to solve the goal, the challenge, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you have to, of course, link your goal to a bigger change and by some sort of an assumption, and evaluate this assumption. So I think that two sides of the coin in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. What I appreciated in the method that you proposed for as the Ostrobotnian model, you do actually both things, because you look very specifically for the gaps. You make a very analytical gaps analysis, which you then discuss with the parties involved.
Yes, in a way that if I can elaborate something on that, we started, a long time ago, and asking that if we speak about an innovation system, what makes it a system?
Yeah.
And then we said that it must be a structured dialogue. And then you have two additional questions: what should we speak about, and with whom should we speak? And then we answer that question with the smart specialization strategies, because they have the stakeholders in the export sector, and we would speak about the innovation networks. And then we had a parameters of expectations or experiences on a scale 1 to 10, and the difference between the expectations and the experiences is a gap. And then we have a dialogue on that gap.
Yeah.
Now, does that gap cover everything? No, it doesn't. But it sort of benchmarks the discussions that we have something to engage with. And it's like I've been doing GDP calculations in the third world quite a lot. And if you go to an African context, they say that, well, GDP doesn't really a measurement of well-being. Maybe you should use the Human Development Index or something else. But still, the GDP gives a benchmark to discuss on well-being by other indices. And in the same way, in the structured dialogue, I think function as an input to the wider innovation process. So we have sort of had the dialogue with the leading companies, but we have also quite actively communicated our dialogue in different publications.
Yeah, yeah. So you choose your dialogue as a function of the discrepancies and of the gaps.
We have I mean, we ask about the expectations of the innovation partners, like for instance, industry university, and then say that they have an expectations of being 8 and experience of being 6. Then you have a gap of being 2.
Yeah.
And then we collect them and say, well, what is the reason for the gap? And what kind of new innovation partner should you look for to bridge that gap? And then we try to do that, and then we repeat it in 2 years' time. And that's how we sort of updating the strategies based on the triple helix networks.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite interesting. Look, could you comment on the question? How do you seek cooperation? What is your experience or your starting point, if you want?
Yes, thank you, Charles. I'll be happy to comment. Maybe let me first refer to one sentence I found particularly appealing in the learning network proposition. It was also implicitly already mentioned by Raluca in the beginning, that a lot of good quality guidance has been written about what needs to happen, but surely not as much about how to do so. Only for this reason, I already fully welcome this initiative, and I really like the words used by Christian about this network being a knowledge processing factory. And the question is about how to start collaboration when there's no collaboration there. But I think actually maybe one of the main difficulties is that when you at least from my experience, when you try to change something, you always try to change something, start a collaboration within an existing context, existing structures with actors with specific objectives, with specific interests, and which might or often might not align with what you intend to achieve. So you have to deal with that. And as a result of that is that, and this was also written in the proposition, that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So you really always, I believe, have to adapt to the situation which is there. And my experience is mainly with starting small-scale bottom-up initiatives, starting collaboration to achieve specific objectives by starting new experiments and things like that. And what I've learned over the past years is that I always start with people, in the sense that I have an idea and I try to connect to the people who I believe can contribute to achieving what I have in mind. And that means in my case, Northern Netherlands, we have a pretty mature ecosystem, in the sense that the structure is there and you have to deal with it. My approach often is that I try to avoid structures, boards, meetings where people are who represent a specific interest. Because if I start there, if I make a proposal and present it there, I often end up with some kind of, at best, some compromise of what I actually have in mind. So my approach is always kind of informal. Try to reach out to people at specific places. In the beginning, even irrespective of where they are, but more about what ideas they have, how they align with my ideas, and how they can help. And then through those people, kind of start small, and then connect to others who have the decision power, to make things happen.
Okay.
This is in essence what I've been doing over the past years, and over these past years, I've been able to create these several and create and also connect to several really small informal networks, which are in existence now in the region, which I use, but not only I use, to gradually make changes somewhere else, higher up in the system. And this is an approach which is maybe it's typical to the Dutch situation, where we have an informal attitude anyway of making changes, but it works.
Okay. Thank you. So we have different perspectives. Jerker. Yeah, Jerker. Please.
Yes, no, my comment was that I also agree, with Roberta and Luc and Charles on the context of the institutional setting, and you are writing that in your book as well, that you cannot be better than your ecosystem, or you're quoting something like that.
Yeah.
And the problem you are having here is that we are looking at the stakeholders, and stakeholders always holds onto the stake. And so they are trying to break any change of it, or they have maybe a bigger loyalty towards the institutions than what they have towards the challenges, and trying to survive institutionally, because that is very much linked with their own power. So then you have to find the persons who do have an urgency to meet that power, and who are sort of motivated by an ownership of the challenge, and see how they can sort of act. Usually there are persons in the margins, because if they would have the big power, they would have already made the change. So you have to look for anything that starts with informal or friends or something like that, or
Yeah.
And also you have to look, I think, for knowledgeable solutions, because I mean, usually if I network with somebody, it is for very selfish reasons. I want to have something from that person in form of an interesting discussion, and something that person can bring to the table. So I think it's development of methodologies. And then on your comment on your book on the methods, I think the methods matter in the co-creation. Like for an example, that if you, for instance, take a SWOT analysis as a very simple analysis, you start to talk about something local, that's something that you would like to, you have something in your region and you would like to develop that something in the region. If you, for instance, start with the DeepSear analysis that we have experimented with, of the drivers and the pressures and so on, you're automatically going to common challenges that are, if you look the GILS format, you look at that landscape level. So methods matter, how you organize the process. Thank you.
Yeah, method matter. So Jerker is raising the issue of power, which is parallel to the issue of knowledge, which was highlighted by Christian and by all the others. So how do they interplay? The power and the knowledge, because you work with both variables, I would say, both aspects as a first mover.
That will be, for me, that will be the big challenge, because when you look in some countries and region, the expectation in terms of development, there sometimes is a dream. How many times, even if you look or listen to a commissioner, Europe will be the birthplace of the next Amazon, Google, Apple, or whatever. No way, guys, never. Never. And it's the same. If you look to S3 from the most lagging region, bio, nano, etc., at least in the first generation, no way. It's just political dream. I live in Wallonia. Since the steel and the coal industry have closed, the politician says we have plenty of future, bright future, or whatever.
We haven't seen
What
it.
has happened?
Thank you.
Even LEGO don't want to invest in that region recently. So
I see a hand raised by Roberta. Roberta,
yes, sorry, yes. This question of power and knowledge, and which has been somehow touched either by Luke and Jaker. In my opinion, at least my experience is that we, as first movers in our context, different context at regional or European level, we have to take into consideration this balance a lot. We cannot think that a reform or a change cannot be if there is the necessity of an intervention by public powers can be done only by a change of behavior of people, even if the change of behavior of people can be a strong hint in order to make the change at institutional level. But at least in my experience, for what we do usually, even if you do an analysis, when you take the data, which data do you take? How you read the data? The power is important, and we cannot pretend it is not. So the question of people like us who have to deal with different interests and make them converge to in order to face a common challenge, if we don't want to talk about the goal, which is another thing, like Jaker underlined, we have to take into consideration the powers. And of course, changing the mind of people who have the power is a process which will not be done in 1 month or even in 12 months. like
No.
so.
Yeah.
So the thing is to try to find the different solution in order to make this change in your ecosystem. Take into consideration what you have on the ground, like many of the previous speakers already told, and trying to balance the different interests. Of course, this is a very difficult exercise for the facilitator or the people who are involved in this exercise, but it obviously the objective to reach a pact among the because this is the objective, to have a pact among the different participants who have to agree upon the way to face the challenge and the tools to face the challenge and to monitor the process is unavoidably a compromise. You have to reach a compromise, but better to reach something than nothing, I think.
Yeah.
So this
Thank
is
you.
my point of view.
Yeah. Good. Last point, last hand raised by Jörg, and then we are going to
well, I mean, just a short comment. I mean, if you separate between power and knowledge, I mean, I have power over you if I can get you to do something against your will. That's the sick. Knowledge is a sort of a carrot. I can present a vision for you for the future, and I think the carrot is stronger in a dynamic sense. It changes.
Yeah.
And then of course, as Christian was saying, yes, there are political dreams, but you have to accept them. But otherwise, this politician doesn't get re-elected. Basically, they need the headlines. They need all this, and there's also a danger of that. And because what I am doing in relation to those dreams becomes so small, and then there's a danger that if you are painting up very big things, the first movers, they won't have or the small people, they won't have the ownership of the development. And I think that's a danger, and you have to take it for what it is. It's something that you have to be very ambitious on to get re-elected.
Well, that's a good point you say. That the change is not always done by the people who own the power. And
no, because because if it would be, they would have already changed it.
It would best be simple, yeah. It's not.
But they hold on to the stake or to the power.
Yeah. I thank you. I thank you for this conclusion. Also, with a hopeful note, you say the carrot is a bit stronger than the stick. With this, we have a lot to think about. I won't summarize but I think the reflection is typical of the profession you're in, and so it leaves you with more questions than answers, than ready answers. But I think there is some guidance in the wisdom that we have heard. So, Luca, will you take us to the next step?
Yes, thank you, Charles, and thank you, everybody, for actually not making it easy, because it's not easy.
It's not easy.
Nevertheless, we need to know that it's not easy, and to just take this as an being accepted. And I must say that I liked very much the phrasing of Christian. Christian has his way to phrase things and to capture meaning in a very peculiar way. When he said to create unfair competitive advantage by such a learning network. And even if unfair is not a right word, to say that it's a bonus somehow. It's a way to empower more, to perhaps cross-circuit, to cross-cut. It's also about cross-cutting something. that is going on now. Anyways, it's my pleasure to introduce the next 4 invitees. And I will start with Giacomo Matino, who is head of unit within the DG for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. He's an EU passionate. I loved this phrase, and we need many EU passionates, especially today. His focus is particularly on the industrial component of the internal market and the international dimension of SME support. He has been working for over 30 years in shaping and implementing EU policies for several industrial sectors, such as automotive and now agri-food and pharmaceuticals. I would go and introduce all the panelists, and then we come back, and I will invite you to take the floor. Richard Taps is now retired and living in Brussels. He was the director of ERIN, a successful and expanding Brussels-based network promoting research and innovation and regional development. Richard is a founder member of Friends of Smart Specialization, which you know quite well, I'm sure. And this network has produced papers and organized several seminars about the transformation of smart specialization in order to encompass and uptake sustainability and ESG principles. We have from over the Atlantic, we have Lenia Planas Serralta. Lenia is Chilean with Cuban roots. She has been living in Chile for 28 years now, and she specialized in management of regional economic promotion. She has a master's degree in economics and regional management in Chile, and in 2016 she graduated her PhD in economic sciences with a focus on regional innovation strategies and systems. The work has been done in the context of an international cooperation project, which provided the context for the first institutional laboratory for the design and implementation of regional innovation policies in Chile. Lenia is now leading her own company, Impronta Consulting in Chile, and I must say that we know each other thanks to our wonderful common friend, Jaime del Castillo. Raúl Tavares Gutierrez is a senior researcher at Fundación Tecnalia Research and Innovation in the north of Spain, where he works at the intersection of digitalization, policy, and culture. He is associate professor in the Masters of Philosophical Challenges at the Open University of Catalonia, where he teaches a very challenging field, techno-scientific challenges. His work has been published in top-rated journals, and he also produced a significant number of conference papers, and his research now is focused on digital cultures and responsible innovation. So going back to the easy question, how did you start collaboration where there was none or little before? Giacomo, with your long-lasting experience and with your many verticals and sector specializations, please, you give it a go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Raluca, and good afternoon to all. Well, first, maybe let me start with a personal note, and why I was really pleased and happy to intervene is that with Raluca, we have been really working well and interacting quite a lot when we were both involved in the Enterprise Europe Network activities. I was there from the policy, heading the unit, responsible for the policy part of it. Raluca was coordinating for Romania, but was also an active member. So, I mean, the network itself, you see, in the Enterprise Europe Network, there is this element of the network in itself is a very was a very interesting experience. Now, I suppose that you expect from me, given my role, a bit the view and thoughts from the policy making and the EU policy making level. Well, I hope not disappointing anybody by saying that certainly some of the challenges that we have heard in the very, I would say, interesting and dense first session are equally valid, and that many were focused and based on experience of of regional development, but are valid also at EU level. And when you want to, and I would like maybe to make a few references to my current experience right now. That I hope can be helpful. So first of all, the challenges and the challenges when looking at building up, creating or enhancing collaboration. Some of the challenges or the factors to be taken into account certainly are the complexity of of our world, of our interactions, being it at local level, regional level, EU level, or even more at global level. So I think that for first movers, navigate first through the complexity and therefore also, and it was mentioned as one of the elements, I realized the capturing the interaction among the actors. It's a very it's a very important factor to be noted. And then another element, and there again I think it was mentioned and captured, if I'm not wrong, it was by Roberta, I think, the element of the multiplicity of motivation. So when we put together groups of around the project, around a policy initiative, around even broad policy objectives, we are faced in any case to a multiplicity of motivation, and drawing from that the common element that would drive through. I think it's a very important element, and I think that in your toolbox, suggesting tools and elements for the first mover animating networks, it's a very important factor. What I would say also is that it's very important to look at, and this linked to what I said before, to create a common narrative and really link and motivate the participants to the common objective. And this is probably the most complex, I would say, task. And also in my daily life and work still now, I see, for example, that we are trying to reinforce the EU manufacturing base in pharmaceutical production. Pharmaceutical product industry, it's an area with global, I would say it's global by nature, with a lot of actors, the main industrial actors, including the EU ones who have a very important place already now, are global players. So how do we reinforce EU manufacturing base while at the same time keeping the global imprint? So there, I think what is important, and there I heard the term, and I liked it a lot. I think it was by Jerker, the term of structured dialogue. It's a very important, I would say, it's a very important tool. Of course, it's not an objective per se, but it's a tool that shall really allow, ideally, and when well, I would say, shaped and well oriented, shall allow to draw a number of useful results, conclusions at least, and in my perspective, in my experience, this feeds then avenues for policy decisions that are made at the level of either the European Union or the member states, or even at regional level. So the fact of being able to shape a productive structured dialogue of the parties involved. And once again, complexity there, it's, or I would say nowadays, an inherent characteristic of our, of our interaction, of our way of acting. Then this could lead really to the best input for then, the next steps in the process. Yeah, so these are the few elements at this stage, at least I wanted to share with you. The other element clearly, and Raluca, you mentioned it, I think it was the element, and it's linked to creating a structured dialogue. It's the issue of co-creation. If I think if the dynamic is well established, the process of co-creation is certainly one, no matter how more complex it is, that can certainly ensure or at least have high level of ensuring, very good results at the end, and to be productive. So definitely a lot of efforts by the facilitators, by the first mover, by those who want to kickstart the process, has to be put also in I would say animating in the best possible way the co-creation. And of course there are a number of tools for that that I'm sure most of you here participating in the discussion know very well, but I think the one that deserves the animation and relying on co-creation, it's something that can certainly be of extreme benefit. Maybe for the sake of time, I will stop here, but very happy to build then further or exchange further reflections as the exchange goes on. Thanks.
Thank you, Giacomo. And I would add into the complexity, but also in a way to override the complexity, because indeed complexity is overwhelming as from the role of the first mover. But given the fact that we consider that learning networks will include first movers even from different countries and different geographies, then let's also consider this into the topic. How do we see that such a multi-country approach will make things easier for the first movers? I would go now to Richard, and then Giacomo, we can of course come back later on. I would go to Richard. We have recently prepared a presentation together, and I remember that we discussed about learning networks for first movers in the context of the TETIS project. And with Richard, we discussed about this thing about partnership and governance, and the fact that, well, there are many obstacles until we arrive to have an ongoing partnership for taking actions into implementation.
Thank you.
I want to give you the floor.
Raluca, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
I'm not seeing myself on screen, and I may apologize if there's a problem with my video here. First of all, thanks very much for
we can hear you.
And yes. I mean, you mentioned this word, the role of collaboration, and I'm thinking of going to the supermarket, of buy two get three. I mean, the whole thing of collaborate. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me now. Right?
Yes.
Basically, I think I won't go into much on the collaboration, because I think in the first panel that was taken up quite a lot. What I would like to talk about, though, is the something also that you mentioned about the learning network, and you mentioned this first mover and importance of the first mover. And of course, you mentioned my interest in smart specialization. So I'd like to take just a very quick point on that, is that the entrepreneurial discovery process is a key aspect of smart specialization. And this is where exactly the learning network, I think, can bring in a lot more a lot of information and knowledge about how to do it correctly. And I mean, Christian made the point that a lot of smart specialization strategies are cut and paste, you know, that we all want the same Silicon Valley, and that's not going to happen. But I think one of the key aspects of where we need to work on is not just creating the strategy, but implementing it. And I remember it was in the project we had recently where we talked to people from a research institute about implementation. And their first question is, we never implement, we just write policy. So it is a part of how do you get the people who write the policy to actually engage in its implementation. And I think that's a key issue and one of the things we need to work on. And this is where this come into this. So it isn't just a linear process, but it is a circularity that you mentioned in that area. Another area where I think where the learning network is important is when you bring in a new idea into the mix. And this is something you also mentioned that I'm quite involved now in this ESG, environment, social and governance debate. And this is where a new sort of coming in, where companies particularly have got to engage in this new agenda. And how do you get that new agenda started? And I think this is very much where the learning network can give you inside ways of how do we start that. And because this is very much first mover, I've noticed in that very area. So that's an important area, and that brings in not just environmental aspect, you know, how do we reduce our greenhouse gas, but it also brings in the social, how we are organized, and the governance is particularly around the leadership aspect of that. So I think that's very important sort of area. But I just like to make 2 points that I think we haven't picked up. One is it comes into one, and I think it's come into this power question that we're in, is this, what I'd like to talk about is this cultural context. Because what you might say, and I think that's Lenia might pick up on this, we're talking about in Europe, we have different perspectives on culture, power and distance, if you like, and it may be very different from countries, you know, where you might have a more hierarchical power system when perhaps Jerka is there in the Nordic countries when it's sort of a closer, you know, it's this flatter system, if you like. So, I mean, there's power distance, individuality versus collective, you know, uncertainty and certainty. You could go through a lot of these sort of areas on that first thing. And Christian's already said he picked up also in a previous paper, I think, this idea of a political aspect of that on sort of a more nationalistic agendas that are coming out in Europe. And we're seeing that rise of sort of right-wing nationalist parties in Europe. The second and last point I want to make is this political aspect. And I've just been recently engaged in this a bit. And one of the problems I think you have is the parties are often looking at slogans, not policies. And I think this is something that comes to me. It's often where you need a slogan for an election. And this means differentiation. So you want to differentiate yourself from other parties. And Christian's point again about a green party that doesn't want a wind farm is interesting, but it does show that sometimes politics doesn't follow policy. And I think this is another issue we need to pick up. So I think the last point I want to make is what you're picking up on the learning network, and what I think everybody's mentioned already, is that something we've looked at the what, but we haven't looked at the how as much. That I think Luke mentioned. But what we need to do is that obviously now there is a clear shift towards a more sustainable and social dimension in Europe. And this, I picked this up from S3 to S4, and if we bring in the social sort of to S5, and there's obviously a lot more attention now to the sort of social dimension generally within the community, because it's not just being innovative, it's innovative for who? And is the innovation going to bring benefits for the community in the region that you're in? So those are just a few points I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And indeed, very, very critical points. And you pinpointed, let's say, some fractures, the fracture between strategy design and strategy implementation. This paradox that some organizations do the policy, others do the implementation. or the fractures between politics and policy.
Yeah.
So
Mazzucato has just done this sort of thing of looking at this sort of consultancy sort of aspect. You know, that we're losing competences often within government because of problems of public sector, and what's happening is that often, and I have to be a bit careful, Raluca, is that we're often sort of giving work to consultants and losing the competence at the local and government level. So we rely on, you know, saying consultants who have no interest in implementing. And this is the danger, I think, where there's a fracture. And this is where we've got to bring back competence within to the government section. And that's something that's quite difficult now because we've seen in all countries, I think, public expenditure, public in resources in the public sector have gone down. And so I think this is so again, this is where we've got to be creative, but how do we maximize these sort of connections to, in a way, to build back competence into that sector?
yes, absolutely. And indeed, I also see consultants that are required to create a strategy on behalf of a public entity or on behalf of a public-private partnership. And that's again a fracture. Because that's not what learning networks are proposing. Is exactly the opposite. So basically accompanying first movers and accompanying those competencies where they should be and where they are supposed to be. And also about the cultural, interesting comment about the cultural differences and the cultural variety, diversity. I'm going to Lenia now. Lenia will speak in Spanish and I will translate as good as I can. Nevertheless, I would like to pinpoint the fact that cultural diversity is very informative. You know, somehow, and I must say this, but I say it quickly. I worked in regional development in the context of a pre-accession country and then early accession country. We needed to do everything on a quick learning cycle, a very quick one. We had to do many things from scratch, very quickly, learn fast, solve quickly. And I feel that somehow the challenges of today, climate, social challenges, they put us all in this situation. It's not like, yes, and I gave that quote that you are as good as the ecosystem you are in. I provided that quote, is a quote from Estonia, actually. But nevertheless, in this given context of the present times, it's like not anymore any ecosystem is perfect. And it's, you know, it's about learning and doing something differently. So Lenia, I will give you the floor to say a few comments. Lenia, gracias por unirte con nosotros y voy a traducir lo que tú nos vas a contar en español. Gracias. Sí, voy a abrir yo a tu micrófono un ratito. Normalmente puedes hacerlo tú también, abrir el micrófono, pero voy a hacerlo yo. Ahora creo que va a funcionar. Sí, ahora tienes el micrófono.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias por la invitación a Raluca, pero también a todos ustedes, porque pese a mi poco dominio del inglés, he podido entender que estoy en una conversación privilegiada de aprendizaje.
Lenia is thanking us all for what he has listened until now. She has a good listening skill of English language, so she realized, and I quote, that she is part of a privileged conversation.
El motivo fundamental en el caso, al menos por mi experiencia, de que los actores colaboraran fundamentalmente en Chile y también un poco en Perú y en Colombia, tiene que ver fundamentalmente por reglamentaciones institucionales, por incentivos institucionales que lo obligaban a hacerlos.
Lenia is saying that a lot of what she noticed that was done in collaboration in Chile, in Peru, and also a little bit in Colombia was very much impulsed. So it was incentivized by public initiatives, so by public arrangement, by public funding.
Y una de las dificultades fundamentales es la tremenda desconfianza y falta de capital social que hay entre los distintos stakeholders respecto a las decisiones de quienes tienen el poder.
There is a big challenge in terms of the lack of trust and the social competencies, and especially in relation to the ones that are decision makers and the ones that have the power to do things.
Lo que ha ido pasando desde el año 2012 a la fecha es que efectivamente las primeras estrategias regionales de innovación que se aplicaron en Chile ayudó mucho que existiera una norma que obligara de alguna manera a que el gobierno central junto con las regiones avanzaran hacia la planificación estratégica de la innovación y construyeran capital social.
From 2012 until now, the big achievements of the first regional innovation strategies in Chile was that actually supported the stakeholders, the government on one hand, and the regions on the other hand, to do strategy together, so to develop strategies together and strengthen the social capital.
Tras 6 años se mantuvo una dinámica, al menos en el caso de Chile, que permitió que lo que era un ejercicio voluntario, semi-voluntario, porque existía una norma en que era necesario darle direccionalidad a unos fondos para los temas de innovación, fondos que eran originarios de royalty minero. Lo que pasó después de 6 años es que efectivamente se logra una ley de regionalización que define una forma de colaboración y una forma de darle sentido a las estrategias y a los fondos para la transformación productiva de los distintos territorios.
So in the last 6 years, there has been a dynamic that started with a voluntary or semi-voluntary exercise at the beginning, putting forth some funds, dedicated funds, that were previously coming from resources in the mining industry. And also to set up some laws and regulations for regions in order to collaborate and to use funds in order to lead to a change in the way that production took place at regional level.
Sin embargo, no es suficiente movilizar el poder, el conocimiento y la acción por un bien común superior. En el caso de las estrategias, en el caso de la colaboración. Es importante tener en cuenta que hay una creciente desconfianza aún más, por ejemplo, en el caso chileno, que está definiendo su vida constitucional en este momento, con un cambio generacional, mayor complejidad a la hora de tomar las decisiones a nivel nacional y subnacional en esa relación, y una mayor corrupción. Y sin embargo, no hay cómo mitigar esa corrupción que muchas veces lleva el disfraz colaborativo de distintos actores al momento de trabajar en las estrategias de innovación o de especialización inteligente o inspiradas en estas.
Okay, so I will briefly explain what you detailed now. So it's not enough just to regulate or to establish laws and frameworks in order to put strategies into practice. It's and to increase stakeholder collaboration. Especially given the fact that in Chile there is a distrust that is hindering the collaboration between stakeholders. At the same time, there is a generational change that is also influencing the way that decision making is done in Chile in this particular case, as well as the corruption, the challenge of corruption that of course influences the way that stakeholders collaborate, and consequently that regional innovation strategies are implemented.
La inconsistencia dinámica que se genera con los cambios de gobierno hace que el rol de los distintos colaboradores vaya cambiando. Lo bueno de la experiencia, al menos chilena y en parte peruana, es que si bien muchos de los colaboradores estaban en el sector público, al pasar al sector privado, siguieron con su militancia en los temas de activismo hacia las estrategias de innovación y colaborando con los gobiernos. No obstante eso, la verdad es que lo que uno puede ver es que existe bastante escasa capitalización del aprendizaje a lo largo de las distintas administraciones, y prácticamente muchas veces hay que empezar desde muy al inicio a explicar los procesos. Por lo tanto, los consultores de procesos en materia de las estrategias regionales de innovación siempre van a tener trabajo en este lado de América Latina, por la falta de continuidad en el aprendizaje, y también porque es conveniente para los estrategas y también para los gestores que son contratados por los llamados estrategas, que son los que toman las decisiones. La colaboración.
Lenia, sorry, I will translate this. So there is inconsistency due to government changes in Chile, but on the other hand, a good thing and an achievement is that many professionals from the public sector lately they moved in the private sector, even in the NGO and the activist type of NGOs, and they collaborate with the government. On the other hand, and this is a specific need, there is no capitalization of learning alongside and within administration, within the administration. So no capitalization of learning, reason for why this type of process consulting is very valuable for Chile.
No obstante ello, en Chile existe una gran apertura hacia la experiencia europea en materia de las estrategias regionales de innovación, pero también a las de especialización, sobre todo porque el país ha planteado una estrategia de transformación productiva que significa estar o más bien asumir el desafío del desarrollo de ciertas industrias industrias en materia de hidrógeno verde, en materia del litio, industrias que significan mucho para el desarrollo del país y que podría darle un posicionamiento totalmente distinto a los distintos agentes. Por lo tanto, hay un gran espacio para el aprendizaje y una gran oportunidad, y eso invita a la colaboración.
Thank you, Lenia. Thank you very much. It's a positive, es una conclusión muy positiva, optimista. Lenia mentions that Chile is very open to uptake experiences from Europe, not only in the regional innovation strategies, but also in the transformation of manufacturing. And she refers to a specific industrial value chains, such as the green hydrogen production or lithium batteries production, that would allow for a new industrial positioning of Chile on the global market. So at the end of the day, all of this means that Chile is open to learning, and is learning means collaboration, so it's open to collaboration. Lenia, muchas gracias por el momento. Voy a tomar otras intervenciones y después, si quieres también contribuir, lo puedes hacer sin problema. Muchas gracias, Lenia. And I'm going now to Raúl, who has been patiently listening. I see two hands raised, and immediately after Raúl, Giacomo and Jirker, I would invite you to bring your remarks. So Raúl, now that you have listened to so many angles of the story, how would you define the story from your point of view?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Raluca, for organizing this event and also for the invitation. I'm more than happy to be here with this group of people and the long experience that is behind all of these people. I think that I just want to build on the implementation point of Richard, which I think is the usually not the appealing one for the public administration, right? So at least in my experience, I mean, due to different projects, when this thing of collaboration needs to be started, and you have to go into the innovation ecosystem and establishing dialogue between different stakeholders, and also because of this momentum that we have, that we are witnessing, that we are enriching and broadening stakeholders, or at least the networks that we are supposed to address. But it's really challenging to have people from the public administration willing to be engaged in all of these approaches, like urban living, social labs, and this kind of collaboration platform. So I think that feedback that for your document, which I think is really great, is also demands some kind of attention to materialism of this intervention. And when I say materialism of this intervention, I'm referring to places where this kind of stakeholders need to be engaged, places that are safe, places that are neutral, places that can be convenient and friendly for all of these stakeholders, that have different positions, different attitudes, different interests, and these kind of spaces are really important. Another important thing is the tools that you use. I mean, you mentioned some of them, but I think that there is a need for having a toolbox that can be mobilized. For instance, this Partnerships for General Innovation toolkit is composed of different tools that can inspire policymakers and public administration to go onto these interventions. But at the same time, you need a kind of script, philosophy, or rationale that can group these tools. And this is something that is missed right now in the, I would not say in the whole European strategy, but also in the implementation of these strategies. I think that usually is one of the main things that we found in different regions and different innovation ecosystem, that there is no, I mean, there is the willingness of doing this kind of interventions, but you need a philosophy behind these approaches and how you put all of these things together into something meaningful for different agents. And yeah, and also, yeah, I think that the battery of my laptop is going to run off, so I will be brief. And I think that the last thing that I would like to also to stress is that being a first mover is really important for sure, but also trying to address your most opposite agent or stakeholder is really important as well, because as we are seeing right now, and I mean there have been different interventions that have touched upon this topic, but we are seeing different polarized position, different policies that are completely against each other. And having all of these opposites in the same room is really important right now. I mean, there is a major gap in all of these public debates of trying to avoid the opposite position, and it's not a good idea, I think. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Raul. Very delicate, touchy, sensitive points you noticed, and this place where should be a place that is safe and where people can open up, absolutely. Then the meaning and the philosophy behind what's the meaning, what is actually bringing us together, which is the glue. And then last but not least, the opposites. And it's an interesting interplay when you are in the same room. Then you act differently. It's interesting that when you are in the same room, then acting like opposites becomes different. I would dare to say. Giacomo, please.
I think Jerker was first, so maybe
okay.
I'll...
Okay. Yes, sorry, I didn't notice.
Okay,
yes,
no problem. I would just, confirm the points made of Linia, and we are currently involved in a cooperation with Magallanes, which is Patagonia, as south as you can get. And then we had a delegation from Patagonia in Estrobotnia a week ago, a little bit more. And it's typically, we are using the same words, but we are meaning different things. And that's the cultural context. That if we speak about private-public partnerships, our thinking is something very informal. In the Latin context, I mean, they think it's about writing an agreement, very formal. Even I had the ambassador, Mrs. Belén Zapac from the Chile's ambassador to Finland, joining the team, and she also said that it's very important that you involve the central state, that you involve the stakeholders, that you write the formal agreement. And she promised to be helpful in this context. And this is something that we don't realize in Europe, what the European Union has done to the regions that we can as region be global actors that you cannot do in Chile. Especially previously we would be cooperating with Argentina. Argentina was more a federative state. Chile have a stronger state, but they are more centralized in these respects. Then, of course, this also affects the ownership. I can take you an example. I came to Bolivia first in a different position as an advisor or a team leader for the statistics Sweden's team in Bolivia, and they had made a perfect strategy produced by Statistics Canada, and that strategy was in 7 volumes, and it's written in English but translated into Spanish. And there was one word that was not translated but was in brackets, And that word was ownership, because nobody in Bolivia understood the context of ownership, of owning your work and you know, having your order and so on. And I mean, it's apropiación in Spanish, but to internalize the concept in the structure is a very important thing. And it's a very important thing that you realize when you move in a country where very, very interesting things are happening just now. In Tierra del Fuego, they have foreign direct investments, big challenges for risk for having Dutch disease and so on. Then on Richard's point on also consultants, yes, we should not externalize that. But sometimes, having worked as a consultant myself, you can present to the leadership ideas that already are in the organization that you're communicating, and you can point this out being external, but you have gaining your ideas from interviewing the people on the middle level, sort of. And this is sort of also the first move, as it goes back to the point that we were speaking on earlier on leadership in organizations and on power and so on. So I think also that we have the same thing in Europe as well. Maybe it's not that pronounced like in Latin America, but many times when you speak about co-creation, and we should have you know, similar views, like in the Partnership for Regional Innovation where we're working now, we never get the same view, everybody of us. There must be some leadership. You cannot serve, you cannot externalize your decision making if you're in charge of something.
Yeah,
that is very important to know.
right, yes.
It is very interesting. We are now trying to export the greenhouse sector to Magallanes and the ecosystem for that. So we have a very interesting project in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very exciting. Giacomo?
Yeah, also to share some thoughts while listening to the interesting input from Lenya concerning the international dimension and the international collaboration. You know, right now we are also solicited for areas that I'm covering in my service, for example, pharmaceutical production, vaccine production specifically, but goes beyond. So I think that you know, some important factors of context is that if we want really sustainable, I would say, and something lasting over time of collaboration. So on one hand, there is the interinstitutional setup that certainly, you know, with our experience in Europe, we can help, you know, other countries or regions to set up. But the challenge also, and this I think is very interesting for those like you, you know, who wants to be first movers, or have the role of being first movers in networking. We have to create the good conditions for the industry to be motivated to invest and collaborate. So it's not just a matter of public authorities throwing, you know, and giving financing to, for example, from in our case, to European companies to, you know, to collaborate with companies in South America. In this case, we had not long ago a very interesting event here in Brussels of collaboration for the health, you know, industrial ecosystem between European Union and Latin America. But it's a matter of really convincing also the companies who have the know-how, who have the technology, to find an interest in then collaborating and taking advantage. So there as well, I think that when we, you know, when we think about, if we want peer-to-peer collaboration, but in any case industrial collaboration, you know, we have to think about also, and this is very much for those who also accompanying the process, being policymakers, but also you know, private entities or consultants, to make sure that those who are there then to really invest and to produce finally find the real and long-lasting interest in doing so. So this is something that shall be integrated up front, I would say, in any measure, certainly at policy level, that one has to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Giacomo. Very interesting, this interplay with the motivation of companies and incentivizing of companies, and absolutely, this is a big share of the story, and it's a different thing. Yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up, I would invite Christian to take the floor.
Yeah, two reflections. The first about the discussion about externalizing the decision-making process. I completely agree that that has to be done locally, but the danger is that we accept too often to document the decision-making process to external people. So to come back with this idea of first mover, to work on that is important. Also, what is missing probably in our professional of economic developer are people who are able to interpret data and to find out to think why is there a gap between the expectation and the achievements. What was wrong? Is it the global context would change, or was it more a too optimistic view about the ecosystem delivery and so on? The second point that I want to stress, it's of course important to have the companies on it, but when you embark SME, often they are really changing their mind very quickly. I remember working with one RDA to plan in advance internationalization with visit in different countries, and the company says yes, and then 6 months after nobody turned up, just because the market had changed and they want to go to Italy instead of Germany or vice versa. So it's really difficult. And many of the people who have tried to use voucher and to give them an international taste or whatever have to notice that at the end of the day, the voucher is used locally and not so internationally. So it's not so easy to embark the companies into our journey when we draft the strategy.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, well, it's in a way it's also the fracture in between universes, because public organizations have a certain mindset, companies a different mindset, and when it's moment to come together, then yeah, there should be some new avenues to collaborate. Charles, would you like to? Well, we have two more hands raised, 3 hands raised. I would quickly invite you to contribute quickly. I would like to continue this discussion for longer, but I would like to keep the time for all of us to be efficient. But yeah, please, Jirker, Tomasz, and Roberta. I don't know which exactly was the order, but please.
Very shortly, I mean,
Yes.
Why are we in Latin America? Because we have international companies and we need students with the university that has a cultural competence and speaks Spanish that will go into those companies. And usually the internationalization takes place through committing to networks to have, you are having a triple helix network that can go abroad and so on. And sort of, it is not a direct link to the companies, but it goes to the students, goes to the university contacts and so on, and sort of improving the ecosystem that we can, for instance, in my team that I went with, I could include easily Spanish speakers who are in high positions in the university. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
So, can you hear me? I would like to continue to this discussion about how to work with companies. I think that it's very important to note that there are good companies everywhere who can go to the global market, and they do not need our help. who are in need of our help are the companies that wouldn't like to go to foreign markets, but don't know how to do it. And it's not enough that they complain that they don't have a market. They have to have the culture to work together with international companies. So it's a small fraction of the potential companies who can help, who we can help. But I think we should concentrate on them because this is how we can achieve results. Thank you.
Thank you for stressing the point, the fact that, yeah, it takes effort, but it's worth it. Yes, thank you. Roberta, I invite you. Just to open the microphone, please. Yeah, it's open, but we cannot hear you. Your microphone is open, but we cannot hear you. I think it's a sound issue. Not yet. Okay. I was reading on your lips. Go ahead. Okay. Well, Charles, I would invite you before we finish the meeting to just say something that, well, you captured. The first thing that comes to your mind as to be the number one that you capture from the meeting.
It is a multi-fractured reality that we're looking at. And what strikes me is that all you first movers in your own in your own field, they are able to highlight all the layers and all the dimensions. So it's the fractured reality we're looking at. And also one thing I remembered that Raoul made the point that we need some philosophy, I call it practical wisdom. It has been mentioned various times that everything we do is based on common sense. And well, we call it practical wisdom. It's how to apply, how to get things moving, and this is actually what we're looking for. And well, I hope that we can contribute with that through a new discipline that we want to introduce, which is learning networks, so that we can exchange, we can debate, we can see what works, we can compare, and we can learn from each other in a much faster way than we can do by exchanging documents. That is the long way. So we want to do it in the quick way.
Right, Charles. Indeed, you the practical wisdom, and as I said, I know that this meeting could have gone for many hours more. And I need to tell you in this regard that this morning I also created a group on LinkedIn. It's a public group, and I will invite you to opt in if you wish. The group is called Learning Networks for First Movers, and it will be our pleasure to continue the conversations there as well. And soon we shall also announce the expressions of interest. So we will open these expressions of interest for professionals and people who would like to become part of such for the first groups that we will launch in the upcoming weeks. And this will be done via communication through website, LinkedIn, and direct communication. Just to say that at this moment, Learning Networks for First Movers is designed as a program for 12 months with a group of 8 to 10 people, or even more, but slightly more, not much more, coming from various specializations and nationalities. And it goes that there will be face-to-face meetings every 2 months. So basically, for 2 to 3 days, people will meet face-to-face. Hosted in turn, the participants will host in turn these meetings. And each month, there will be online follow-up meetings. So this is the way that we structured the program at the moment. Of course, this will be improved, adapted, and reconsidered in the near future, depending on how things are running. In terms of costs, we calculated at between 4,000 and 6,000 euros per participant. And of course, that this depends on the number of participants. It can be lower, as well as opportunities to fund such learning networks through EU-funded projects, as well as to combine the type of activities that are done at local level with those that are happening at network level. So it's very flexible, and we will take into consideration each situation in the best way, in the optimal way. Well, with this, I would like to thank you. We have overpassed the meeting time with 1 minute, and I would like to also stop the LinkedIn live stream. By all means, thank you once more. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you to everybody who watched on LinkedIn. I can definitely say that I liked very much that the words first movers have been used in this combination many times during the event. And I noticed that each of us felt very comfortable to say first movers. So I guess it's a thing. And well, allow me to keep on communicating with you, Charles and myself, to take this further into making it happen. Okay? Thank you very much, and enjoy the day.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye,
you.
bye, bye, bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Raluca, please stop the recording.